You're listening to What's Contemporary Now, a show about culture and the people, places, and things that together make it up.
So good, so good, so good.
Great brands, great prices. Everyone's got a reason to rack.
Because they have framed jeans.
Nike? Yes.
Just so many good brands.
Vince, Kurt Geiger London, Rag & Bone, and more are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. You never know what you'll find, but you know it's going to be so good. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Jesse Lee's LinkedIn profile features a description that perfectly represents the mindset he's essentially won at life with. 2 simple words: forever intern. Founding the platform Basic.Space that's built upon the idea of curation, from design to style or home goods to automotive. It's not dictated by category as much as it is by quality and timelessness. He went on to acquire Design Miami and is soon to be launching a new IRL to URL shopping experience titled Design.Space, where the worlds of fashion, art, and design will further converge. As we all witness the shifting tides around what's considered luxury in a somewhat post-luxury seeming era, Jesse speaks to it all as a bit of an authority on the matter.
This is Jesse Lee, and we're talking about what's contemporary now.
Jesse Lee, thank you so much for joining us on the show. We're stoked to have you and dive into all these exciting things that you're up to. We do have a general practice of starting at the beginning and trying to find out the things you can't necessarily Google online. But how would you explain your early years and perhaps the experiences that have shaped you to the person you are today?
I actually moved to LA after college without knowing a single person. And so my way into the quote unquote industry, which at the time was music, was my passion. And so I started as an intern. And what I realized is that other interns that were in the room with me were still in college, right? So in some ways, I felt a little behind the 8 ball because I had already graduated. It was just a mindset that I wanted to, do anything and everything for my boss at the time, who I actually still keep in touch with 20 years later. You want to be asking questions, doing favors, learning as much about anything and everything. I used to call into the office actually, even on my off days. And Matt, who was my boss at the time, he would put it on speakerphone and go, "Does anybody need Jesse to do anything today?" That mindset, I think, carried through the subsequent years. So it's not just about the work ethic, but I think also about wanting to learn. And, if it wasn't for that mindset, I don't think I'd be able to learn from music, fashion, technology, art, design, culinary, whatever it is. That's sort of been the mantra since day one.
I feel like we think of a company like Basic.Space, or of course the recent acquisition of Design Miami, when we hear or read your name. But before that, your resume was already pretty damn impressive. So how would you describe the takeaways or learning lessons that you associate with each one of those projects, or even how they've informed the one that came after them?
Yeah. So the first company actually I founded was called DFM. And it was born out of a blog that I used to run called Dub Frequency. So DFM was short for Dub Frequency Media. And what happened was I was writing content and creating content rather around what's new and next in music, fashion, technology. And pretty quickly we started throwing parties and events during South by Southwest, Coachella, New York Fashion Week, Art Basel, Miami, and all these different places. And the sponsors and brand partners eventually just became clients. So we started producing content for certain brands. We started producing events. We helped launch Cash App with Square, several Virgin hotels with Richard Branson, amazing fashion brands and others. And in some ways, we were doing the early version of influencer marketing, I think 10 years ago, before it was called that. And if it weren't for, I think, those opportunities working with brands, I probably wouldn't have thought of the idea for even Basic.Space, because we stumbled onto something that we felt like was authentic to the way we want to market products and brands. But then pretty quickly, a few years into it, we also realized that it just became inauthentic in many ways. Because what used to be cool is you can have amazing talent and friends of ours come to events, post, on social, and it was truly organic. Once you start paying for things, right, it just becomes another form of paid media. So I was both a bit disillusioned, but also saw it as an opportunity because I also had a lot of friends in, again, music, fashion, design, in the creative field, who were super talented, but perhaps didn't have the distribution or, the following that some of the influencers had. And that's kind of actually how Basic.Space came about, because I wanted to serve and support friends of mine who are creative and are multi-hyphenates and connect them directly to consumers. So I felt like if I can get 10 of my friends, 20 of my friends to be sellers on Basic.Space, then eventually we can create an ecosystem of hundreds of creatives and multi-hyphenates that can cross-pollinate and bring eyeballs to what each other is doing. So yeah, that idea sort of came to me around 2018, and 2020 is when we officially launched Basic.Space.
I was going to ask you how you've gone about managing to successfully blend commerce and culture through the platform, but I kind of feel like you just explained it. And how did that end up leading to the acquisition for Design Miami?
Couple of different things to mention there. So one is the co-founder of Design Miami, Craig Robbins, was an early investor in Basic.Space. So Craig and I had known each other for a while, and he's been an amazing supporter and advisor even now. Concurrently, we started seeing like early trends within Basic.Space ecosystem again between our sellers and customers. More and more people being interested in and buying design. And when I say design, it's a pretty broad category that we're hoping to define and support, but it's furniture, home, objects, speakers, right? Different things that you can both collect, but also be functional, like in your daily life. Obviously, I was very familiar with Design Miami, but between Craig and I and a couple of our board members, we sort of started talking about what would it look like if Basic.Space acquired Design Miami. We're trying to build more into the design space. Design Miami, by all accounts, is probably the most respected brand within the collectible design world. And then from Design Miami perspective, and all of our partners, the exhibitors and galleries, want new collectors, right? So then on Basic.Space front, we're bringing the so-called millennial, Gen Z, next gen consumer to the marketplace. So we felt like it's a very strategic / obvious kind of marriage that could work. Mm-hmm. So the deal happened relatively quickly and smoothly. We announced it in October of 2023 at our inaugural Paris fair, actually at the Wall Street Journal dinner. So that was interesting and fun. And we got a lot of exciting plans ahead, and it's been great so far.
How would you describe the differences with Basic.Space today as a result of your now being the chairman of Design Miami? How do they inform one another?
I'm very transparent in that, again, I'm learning. Right. Mm-hmm. So even in the design world, there are a lot of people who know a lot more about design, collectible design, the historical context of it all more than me. But I think I'm pretty good at asking questions, seeking advice from different folks. So one of the things I did immediately is call all the important galleries and partners of ours, make myself available to anyone and everyone, walk the floors. And the way that I observe and learn goes beyond just talking to people. Like, it was funny when I went to Art Basel last year, like in Basel, Switzerland. I walked Basel floor with a gentleman named Simon Andrews, who is an important person on our vetting committee. So he's like the expert who checks everything to make sure the provenance and the quality and everything that they say that they are before we show and open doors at Design Miami. So he's a big historian advisor from London. And he saw me walk Art Basel, and he said he's never walked the floor with someone, one, that walked it so fast, and two, was looking at things that nobody else would look at. And what he meant by that is, of course, I appreciate art and what's hanging on the walls, but I was also looking at all the empty spaces and different parts of the floor that could be utilized differently, mm-hmm. Even down to like how they were serving caviar outside in the courtyard. So I think part of what I try to do at these fairs, or any event for that matter, is trying to look beyond the obvious and see where we can add value. On the flip side, for Basic.Space, thanks to Design Miami and our partnership, we're able to work with the top designers, the top artists, the top galleries. And we're still in the very early stages of integrating some of that into our platform, but it's happening very quickly and seamlessly for the most part. At some point on this podcast, we're going to talk about Design.Space, which is sort of the culmination of it all and something that we're really excited about.
Before we jump into it, I feel like it's such a good example of something that's been a through line in the way you've approached the development of most of your companies, which is thinking about things through the lens of intersectionality.
You mean just like how everything kind of connects?
Well, I remember reading something about how you had raised for your first company with this Venn diagram of three different, and I think Design.Space is very much a similar model. Yeah. So tell us why that's such a big part of your lens.
I remember very specific moments in my life where whether it's parents or teachers or whatever, and they mean well, but they want you to focus on one thing, right? It's like people push you to be an expert in a specific thing and not be distracted by other things, right? And I think that's true in some cases, but I think maybe the part that people don't talk about it is that doesn't mean that you can't master something and then move on to the next thing. People that I've worked closely for many years, they make fun of me / make comments, and my wife does as well, because I also know a lot about basketball, pop culture, gossip, whatever, on top of business, technology, fashion design, art, film, whatever the cool things are. I also absorb and observe like everything that's happening. And because you can leverage that in different situations, and that's how you also sort of build relationships with different people, because everybody has different point of context, different experiences in life and professionally. So to me, like the intersectionality of what you're describing is a must have if you're trying to build a business, because you're not building it just for yourself. It has to be relatable to others. And the best way to be relatable to others, or for others to understand what you're trying to do, is to create moments, dialogues, and whatever that they can connect with. And so for me to be authentic in the design world, it's important that like I can bring something to the table, explain things, and then be a friend and a supporter, you know? So yeah, I just think that it's hopefully a mantra that I can share. No one's saying that you shouldn't be an expert in something, but it's certainly more exciting if you can continue to learn and keep mastering different categories and verticals.
Well, it does feel really relevant because the conversation around whether or not it's more effective to nicheify and specialize or become a generalist as we kind of move into an ever-changing economic and professional climate. I feel like your answer is sort of the answer for anyone who is gifted with that much passion, because let's be honest, that requires a great deal of memory retention and you need to be interested in what it is you're learning.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it on the head. Even with AI and all the advancement happening in technology, I think being a generalist can be a very important aspect of it all. But just as you mentioned, though, you don't want to be a generalist that's just kind of an amateur across the field, right? You really do have to be an expert, and that requires the 10,000 hours people talk about. What that means, though, is you have to spend then 10,000 hours across multiple things, which means that you have to spend 50, 60, 70,000 hours or whatever in lifetime to truly master all these different verticals. So it does require a bit of discipline that way. But I also believe that people should pursue their passion and what they're interested in, because you're more likely to go in deeper, faster, and then you can master that. And then once you realize that you're an expert in something, you have the confidence and conviction to be able to move on to the next thing and then do that too.
100%. And something that we haven't really flagged in your traits is the unique ability to synthesize from a broad subset of information, right? Because that in and of itself is a skill set.
What I used to kind of say in internal meetings too is that like data is important, and learning and studying and retaining information, of course, is all part of that. But then being able to your point, synthesize that, it is like your own algorithm, right? But just like people will say, you need billions or trillions data points to make the best sort of algorithmic results, whatever, right? Well, your mind works the same way. So I would highly encourage people to read, listen, learn as much as possible, because it just becomes practice, and then you will retain information better and quicker and longer, whatever, rather, in terms of memorizing everything. And then you can synthesize, right, a solution or a recommendation, just like machine learning, but it's like your brain doing it. You know, I don't think I read as much when I was younger. Like when I was in high school and college, I hated reading. And I really started learning and reading post-college, again, moving to LA. And I used to just go to Barnes & Noble on Saturdays and Sundays at the Grove and spend 5-6 hours like reading all types of magazines, because I couldn't afford buying all of them. So I would just get like Starbucks iced coffee and sit there for 5-6 hours reading music, fashion, design, business, all that stuff. And then got into a bunch of like autobiographies and biographies of different people I thought were, successful. And I guess point there is that it's never too late to start, but you do have to like take that leap sooner than later in life, and I feel like that's led me to being excited about learning different things. And I felt like in my early 20s, I was almost like behind a lot of people. So it just kind of forced me to read, learn, study a lot more, a lot faster with rigor, and then sort of maintain that discipline even to this day.
Since we're on the kind of what feels like an advice giving track, what are the sources? Is it Medium? Is it still magazines? Is it online? Is it print? How do you keep up?
It's all of it, but I want to be also very, clear. Like, I don't want to make it seem like somehow I'm just like working and learning 24/7, 365. I do like to be entertained like other folks. You just have to kind of pick the right things. So it's not that I don't watch Netflix or HBO Max or whatever, but then the things I do watch, I guess, are mostly kind of autobiographies and like related things or documentaries. I don't watch like fiction, and just since I'm not in my nature. Podcast, same thing. I listen to a lot of business technology. But then I also listen to a lot of like basketball and sports podcasts too, because there are always references that kind of connect the dots at a macro level. So I wouldn't single out any specific outlets, but yeah, I try to consume as much as I can. And I'm semi ashamed to admit that like the last couple of weeks I've been spending a lot of time on X, but then it's just like seeing some crazy stuff out there. And even if I don't agree with some of the content, it just provides a little bit of context to how some people think about things. And it's fascinating. I'm just trying to learn again and just see and understand where people are coming from, even if I completely disagree with their point of view,
If only more people approach things that way, I think we'd be in a much better place. So in this culture of distraction that's been labeled the attention economy, how did Design.Space come up as an idea?
You can have all these amazing amenities and all that stuff, and you can to figure out like the pricing structure of a ticket and how to put out content and the marketing strategies around that. But truly, I think the most important or the clearest way to create an exciting moment is to not only combine them all together the right way in curated form, but try to condense it and make it as succinct as possible. And then combine all the parts around design, fashion, and art and deliver that in a very simple way for you and myself and others that we want participating, attending, and being excited about. So think of it as taking the best elements of Basic.Space and the best elements of Design Miami. So in some ways, it's an ode to both entities, but also combining the best stuff to create something greater, hopefully, and better than each of those as a standalone. And so what that means is IRL to URL shopping experience. I think all of us, especially people listening to this podcast and yourself and myself included, we're native to wanting to experience things in real life, but also buying things for convenience online. And I think for the longest time, for about 15 plus years, a lot of companies try to make a case that one is superior to the other. There are more old school businesses that'll always say, oh, an in-store experience or IRL thing is much more important than online. And then there are a lot of startups who would argue that like an online experience and commerce is way more scalable and better for business for different reasons. And as a consumer myself, always felt like they're equally important. And so it's our job to sort of integrate that seamlessly for ourselves and our customers. So Design.Space is rooted in that. The way it's going to be rolled out is 2 days of online shopping preview for our VICs and VIPs and friends and family, then 2 days only for the IRL shopping experience. And we're purposely doing it on a Saturday, Sunday, because that brings back the idea of going shopping on a weekend. That used to be like a ritual thing for a lot of us. And then we'll have 3 days of online shopping available again for everyone else that, weren't invited to the preview online and for this IRL event, because the other important thing is that we're doing this IRL event shopping experience for our customers and friends and family. So it's by invitation only, but it's not because we're trying to exclude people. It's that we want to actually reward and support those that have supported us, right? So we have an X amount of people in mind, and it's in the few thousands, but those are the people that we want coming to this event because they've supported us over the years, whether they're a Basic.Space seller, customer, Design Miami exhibitor, or collector. So those are the people that are going to be prioritized on the list. So you can't buy tickets. You can't just RSVP if you're not already part of our ecosystem. But again, you'll be able to buy what's available online on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday after the IRL shopping experience. So we are making it available for everyone, but the preview online and the IRL component will be limited to our existing customers and friends.
And what happens after that 3-day window of public access?
So this goes back to your earlier question. So then it's over. So our idea is that we want to create this 7-day shopping window, so to speak, because even on Basic.Space, just on normal circumstances and regardless of what and who we launch with, most of the sales happen within the first couple of days, right? Of course, there's a long tail and like people come back and buy things a month later. I don't want to put out a wrong stat, but like I can tell you most of the products that we sell of any sellers and brands happen within the first couple of days. And so the idea is if we limit it and put some constraints around Design.Space, we actually think we'll sell a lot more, which benefits our sellers and partners and of course us too. So again, we're just trying to like keep things succinct and like very clear and use that as a model moving forward. And of course, Basic.Space is open for shopping 24/7, 365 online. So you can still buy stuff on Basic.Space, but what we feature showcase during Design.Space will be limited to those 7 days.
And talking about the sort of model around Design.Space in terms of limited availability, coinciding with that particular launch, you guys are actually rolling out a change with Basic.Space in terms of it being a public marketplace versus a membership-based situation. So let's talk about that.
You're bringing up a controversial topic, even internally. I think it's healthy to have a little bit of attention in how we kind of grow our ecosystem or sort of like the demand and supply, right? You don't want to be oversupply and under demand, of course, and you also don't want to be over demand and under supply, right? I think for us, I'll be very transparent. I don't know if I've even said this publicly, but like the first couple of years of Basic.Space, we had some really great moments and releases and things like we were growing fast, all that stuff. And you're also sort of like taught or reminded, again, whether through what you read and hear on podcasts, like grow, grow, grow. It's like as a venture-backed startup, you think that like you're supposed to hit certain amount of growth rate year over year. I think we kind of fell into that trap a bit. And what I realized last year or so is let's like take a long-term view and really build for the next 20, 30 years, not the next 2 to 3 quarters. And what that means is we have to sacrifice some short-term benefits, goals, whatever it is, and reorient our business model a little bit and also the team and how we do things. And then I have to convince all the stakeholders, not just investors, but like employees, partners, sellers, friends, whoever, that what we're doing is the right thing for us for the next several decades, if all goes well. Basic.Space was born out of curation, and we kind of have this mantra that like we're obsessively curated. But I would be the first to admit after a couple of years, we sort of got away from that because, okay, we need more sellers to get more customers. We need more customers and then more sellers. Too many products online or whatever. It's hard to distill and get the best ones. Maybe we lost a little of that like specialness, from the beginning. But then how do you make that business successful and be profitable at scale? The simplest answer I can provide is that we have to be willing to make money long-term from a limited number of people rather than chasing larger pool of customers for a shorter amount of time. We want to focus on our top 10, 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, maybe 1 million customers eventually that really care about the same things that we do. Then it's our job to provide different types of products, different types of experiences to then win them over, whether it takes us 1 year or 5 years, because everything we do is organic. We don't pay for things. We never pay for talent, marketing, whatever, meaning it's a little bit harder to convince people to be part of our ecosystem or club. But I'm banking on the fact that once we get you in as a customer or a friend or a supporter, we'll be doing business together for 5, 10, 20 years. So then what does that mean for a membership? I think the best way we're going to do this is, or the way that we want to do it is, web will always be open for anyone and everyone. So like Basic.Space, whether you're on mobile or desktop, you can guest check out and do things and browse. But the app is already closed off for now. And we're only going to allow existing members to have access to it. As a matter of fact, actually, again, this is the first time I'm saying this, we've actually identified our top 10,000 customers, and those people still have access to the app. Everyone else, you'll have to either get invited back in, or eventually we might have a paid model to then have access to online preview and exclusive shopping through the app that's not available on web, and then be invited to future iterations of Design.Space or preview day at Design Miami or an after party at Paris Fashion Week with one of our friends. So the way we kind of see this getting out there is by offering both exclusive experiences and products. And eventually we may charge for that. But for now, we want to make sure that our existing customers enjoy what we're offering. And then we'll learn from that and see what makes sense moving forward.
And going back to the absence of any paid activations or marketing strategy, obviously, to your point earlier of a slow burn that builds a type of traction that wins out in the long game, what were some of the early thoughts that led to the decision not to do those types of activations while growing the brand?
I mean, I think it was just having blinders on and trying to grow as fast as possible. To be fair, though, like I'm not even judging or blaming different investors, not even our investors. Our investors actually have always been very supportive. But even when you just talk to certain VCs or you hear on podcasts or you read and on all these Substacks and stuff, is that like, growth at all costs had been a mantra, but that also came through like the ZERP era. So like there's zero interest rates, money was flush, everybody was raising money. And when there are so many startups in your field, because even if they're not directly competitors, especially at early stage startup, it is kind of like, it feels like a zero sum game. You're either winning or losing, right? And so when you see other companies raise a ton of money, raise again, and then they spend money on paid and you're sort of like drowned out, it's very difficult to see beyond that. Where we're fortunate is that because we never wasted money on marketing or did those things at the level that others have, we've been able to continue on as a business and not have to raise as much money. So that's, I think, one smart thing we did, but we had to pivot a bit and focus back to the core value of it being obsessively curated. And so, yeah, it's lesson learned, but just like everybody else, it is hard to stick to your guns and principles when so much noise and everything's happening around you and you feel like you have to do the same thing. Yeah.
But I feel like, again, as an outsider, the accomplishment that you guys can sort of brag about at this point is also supported in the absence of paid activations, because as an outsider looking in, it kind of gives you that halo of if you know, which has more value. And to your point of the word curation, in such a noisy, saturated world of endless offerings, I think people are desperate for a curated perspective because it gives them something to buy into without having to distill that all on their own. So to me, the absence of marketing feels purposeful, but maybe that's wrong.
No, I appreciate that because I think I'm always going to be the harshest critic of what we do and what I do. So anytime things don't go exactly the way that we wanted, it's my job to take account and sort of make changes, right? And so I think we've gotten better at being more decisive there. The other thing I'll mention actually, because you brought up sort of like one of our mantras, which is we're all about pull instead of push, like marketing. So push marketing is paid ads and being in front of someone over and over, discount sales, whatever you can offer. Pull is more, all right, we're doing this thing over here. If you want to join us or you want to buy something, cool, come buy something. But I'm not going to like sell it to you, right? We're not going to put it in your face over and over and over. So I think pull is a very important aspect of what we do. And I'll even go further and share something controversial with you. December of last year, before holidays, I told our marketing team that we are banning the word community.
Interesting. Okay.
So I'll unpack a little bit what that means. So many brands and companies talk about building communities, right?
Yeah.
And I think the intention of that is very positive and makes sense. But what we would rather build is a club. It's a club, not a community. Basic.Space is a club. We're not a community. And it's actually a very subtle but an important distinction because, again, we're not trying to bring a bunch of people to our side. If you know, as you said earlier. If you're into the same things that we are, cool, come shop with us, come sell with us, come to our events or whatever. But I'm kind of sick of seeing and hearing and everyone's like, we're all about our communities and let's build a community. I think it's gotten so saturated and overblown. We're not here to satisfy everyone. We're here to only focus on our own friends and family and sellers and customers. And that's a club, and a club can be both exclusive, but inclusionary too. And that's kind of another thing we have is we're the cool kid table at the cafeteria, but you could sit with us.
We have talked about the sort of post-luxury era that seems to be emerging and how people have shifted what it is they value or view as a way to communicate status. Obviously, a great deal of that has moved towards the design space. And I know that in a past interview, you had mentioned the pandemic as a reason as to why people were taking pictures of their mirror rather than a selfie in the mirror and the time spent with objects and such. But where do you think this kind of pivot really started as far as design taking over from luxury?
I think there are two reasons why design is the new luxury, so to speak. One is, yes, there's the pandemic-induced, I think, scenario where people spend more time at home, whether they're Zooming or whatever, using their phone devices and posting content from home. So, of course, you want your surrounding to be better than what it was before. I think getting a nicer sofa, chair, mirror, all that stuff is part of it. But the other one that I think is maybe less obvious, but arguably more important, and this is kind of me wearing a marketer's hat. Fashion as an industry, and there's different types of fashion, obviously, but I think over the last 15, 20 years became so big and it's part of the cultural zeitgeist. The downside of that is it's no longer cool to like have a specific sneaker or a certain jacket or a certain collaboration. Collaborations were cool 15 years ago when I was super into streetwear because that was the new thing. Like if you had two different brands that you wouldn't expect to collab, that was cool. But then like 10 years later, it's like everybody did collabs. So how is that cool anymore? If you take that same approach to a certain type of fashion brand, what used to be cool was that you can discover them at opening ceremony or V-Files online or different sites and, collect back in the day. But then now, like through internet and social media, if everybody can find out about this brand and everybody wears it. It used to be a form of expression for people with style and taste. And through social media, it just became commoditized in some ways. And anyone and everyone with money can buy XYZ brand. Concurrently, though, what I was seeing is a lot of my friends that I always felt like had great taste and style were already, into furniture design and all that stuff. And were only spending more of their time and energy in design. So to me, it was like a very obvious trend happening. Just in the last 6 months, so many like fashion brands, luxury brands are featuring furniture design as part of their campaigns, doing that type of collaboration rather than fashion on fashion collab. But yes, we were early in that forecast, but I'm very happy and excited because it just creates a larger market for all of us to play in.
You've already given some advice early on in the conversation, but what would you say have been some of your greatest challenges that you've had to surmount? And what advice would you give anyone looking to start their own project or business in a creative space today?
So the downside of being an entrepreneur, founder, operator, and all that stuff is that it never gets easy. I mean, and I don't want to embellish it, but like every day there's something that happens that you feel like it's like a punch in the face or a punch in the gut. Like you kind of become numb to it. And sometimes you don't have people to really share it with because I don't want to put that burden or responsibility on like my wife or, my friends or my parents even. So I think that's probably the hardest part is that you kind of have to walk your own journey and handle a lot of pressure, things that happen as an entrepreneur. You're basically wearing multiple hats all the time and you're responsible for everything and everyone, that's like the less sexy part of it. But the upside is, of course, and forget even like, I never talk about the financial part of it on any of this is for me, the most exciting part of what I get to do is meet people, learn, and continue to like try and experiment things.
And what advice would you give to someone who wants to start their own thing then?
Again, not to be controversial, but I do think that there are some founders and people that pursue this path because they think it's cool to be a founder and to pursue this path. When I say cool, I don't mean like a cool guy, cool girl being cool, but I think somehow that's what they think they should do, rather than finding something that they're actually really good at and passionate about. Because it's so competitive. You have to be in the, like, not even 1%, like the 0.1% to like really make it work. And to be able to do that, you have to be a true expert. And going back to what we talked about earlier, not only 10,000 hours, but like 50, 60, 70,000 hours across a bunch of verticals. So don't do it because you think you should or because it's cool. Make sure you're committed to it and that you'd be doing it even if you didn't make any money. Like you can't do it for clout and money, because that's not going to help you fight through. Again, like 9 out of 10 things go wrong all the time. And the only way you're going to keep fighting and making it work and pivoting is if you truly believe in the mission and have the energy and the passion and the work ethic to like plow through.
Well said. And the last and final question, what is contemporary now?
I was trying to think about this and I didn't have time to come up with an immediate answer. I think it's the way I would interpret contemporary now is being in the moment. There's a very specific scene in the Chicago Bulls Michael Jordan documentary. And there's this point where a writer talks about what makes Michael Jordan so special and unique compared to every other athlete, because there are many talented athletes. And he talks about how it's not that Jordan can jump higher, run faster, shoot better, or pass better, or whatever. He had this unique ability to be completely like in the moment. And the scene that they show is like him listening to music and just like relaxed before an important playoff game. And he's just goofing around. They said, Michael Jordan doesn't care if he wins or loses or misses a shot. And he doesn't, fret about what happened yesterday or even a minute before. He's always in that moment. And that's how he can be successful, because he's not afraid. To me, like even contemporary now is like being in the moment. So not having any biases from the past or whatever, focusing on like what's now. And then I think even for me, that's what I want to be 10, 20, 30 years from now. I don't want to say like, well, this is contemporary now. And 10 years later, like, no, it may be something else. But as long as I'm true to that moment and what I think is right, I think that is what's contemporary now.
Well said. And I absolutely agree. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was an epic conversation.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of What's Contemporary Now. A special thanks to our producer, Sasha Grinblatt. Audio post-production by Chase Coughlin with original theme music by Joseph Topp-Miller and Chase Coughlin of The Black Soft. And visual design by Aaron Meager and Graham Prentice. Subscribe now to be the first to catch new episodes each week. And if you've enjoyed listening, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a review and let us know your thoughts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners like you. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for additional content and join the conversation. Let us know what you think is contemporary now.